Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Welcome, everyone, to the Even Better podcast. This is Sinikka Waugh on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, welcoming you and hoping that you enjoy being part of our mission to help others have better work days so that together we can co-create better communities. I am delighted to be here today with Joe Van Haecke. Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Sinikka.
This is such a joy. So for those of you who may not know Joe, you'll start to hear a little bit more about Joe through the next few months or so as you hang out with the Your Clear Next Steps team. But Joe and I have had a chance to get acquainted recently, and Joe's got this great background and this really great story. So he, like so many of the people that I admire so much in my life, Joe has a background in education, and he's been in a classroom and he's taught people and made the world a better place through his education. He also has some really cool stuff that you need to know about his improv side. So this is a guy who, in the few months that I've had a chance to know him, has already impressed upon me his compassion for others and his joy of life and his ability to tie improv and the ideas of improv into the business space and into being more successful. So he started off in Kansas City's Comedy City. He's been studying and performing and coaching improv for over 20 years. He studied with Comedy Sportz, Second City, and the IO Theater in Chicago. And he's an improv coach. So as an improvisation coach, Joe's worked with hundreds of students and the power of improvisation, many of whom have continued to study that improv as an art form in college and going forward. They've become actors and producers and directors and business executives and teachers and politicians, so many other things that he's done. And Joe has this, it comes out in everything he does. He has this unshakable belief that anyone can learn and succeed with improv. So his mission is to bring improvisation to businesses, colleges, and the health profession. So I love this, Joe. It is such a joy to be part of a conversation with you. So let's talk about this a little bit. How did you get into improv, and how does this improv relate to like the bigger picture outside of like comedy clubs, which might be the only place some of us will have encountered it?
That's true. That seems to be like the foundation where people think when they first hear the word improv, they automatically think comedy clubs. And actually, that's how I got involved. Growing up, I always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I was in Kansas City living with my best friend. His cousin came over. We were having a big grill out. And I was just being myself, just riffing on whatever was happening. And everybody was laughing and having a good time. His cousin said, "Have you ever heard of Comedy Sportz?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And both my friend and his cousin said, "We're going." That was on a Friday. I think we went to a show on Saturday, and I went to auditions the following Sunday. It was the first time I had seen improv that I can remember, and I fell in love with it. Going through workshops and performing, I see the difference between stand-up comedian, which can at times be kind of a lonely feel up on stage, especially when you're bombing, whereas with improv is much more of a team unit, and maybe you're having an off day. So what? Because your cast members, the fellow players in your ensemble, they got your back, and you just need to trust the process and believe in the outcome that you can't see. Improv is so much fun, and we just really enjoy it. And I know that these skills that we use as improvisers can help make each and every one of us just a stronger leader, a stronger fellow staff member, a fellow employee, not only professionally, but also personally. Just studying improv makes you a better person.
Oh, I love it. And I know that you believe that, and I know that you've seen it play out at time after time. So I am really excited. This podcast, the topic that we're talking about today is the 5 things that improvisers do to be successful. And you're not talking there. I love already you're pointing when you said just a moment ago that if you're having an off day, it's okay because your team has your back. And there's something, I mean, that I know we've got listeners out there right now that resonated and they picked up on that and they went, oh, yes, because we're working as a team. And I know you do team workshops, and that's so important. So I am just looking forward to seeing this unfold, and I'll chime in I think I have exactly 1.5 things I know about improv along the way. So I'll see if I'll try them out, see if they're true. But in the meantime, we're going to let you, the expert, tell us the 5 things that improvisers do to be successful. So the first one you talked about, which is so powerful in so many ways, is listening. And I just, before you even talk, I just got to say this is so phenomenal, because so many of us would have thought that it's about talking, it's about speaking, it's about taking the mic. But your very first thing that improvisers do to be successful is listening. So teach us, inspire us, Mr. B.
Of course, listening, we think we know and we think we're good listeners. What we do in improv is we really teach all of us to slow down and just wait. Too often in conversations or just in general day to day life, we're too busy trying to think of, well, how am I going to respond or what do I want to say here? In improv, we teach no, 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 no. You need to stop and slow down and make sure that you hear what your scene partner says completely. And only then, once you hear their full idea, can you yes and it. And I'm going to use that phrase quite a bit because that seems to be the big umbrella. When everybody hears improv, they think, oh, yes and. That is our number one guiding concept.
Mhm.
There's more to it than just that. It's like an umbrella, everything that falls under yes and. And to me, the post, if you will, that holds up the umbrella of yes and is listening. So I will run exercises that you're not allowed to speak until I count to 5 when your scene partner has finished speaking. I run other exercises where you have to repeat the last 3 words of what your scene partner said before you can speak your sentence. There's another activity that I just focus on that yes and, whereas my scene partner will say, it's time to get a hamburger. My first response has to be, yes, it is time to get a hamburger, and I would like French fries on the side. That was just riffing off the top of my head. Listening is so important. Additionally, we teach that we're not just listening with our ears, but we're listening with our full body. There's a lot of, at times, it's almost mentally exhausting, all the energy we're focused on listening. So I want to pay attention to not only what my scene partner says, but how they say it. What's their body language communicating to me? Because that might be in complete contradiction to the words they're saying. And then I have a choice of how am I going to react? What am I going to react to? And how am I going to react to that? When I work with improv troops that have been around for a while and they just feel stuck, the first thing I'll do is I'll go to one of their rehearsals, watch them, and more often than not, I'm like, let's slow down and listen.
Oh, okay. Let me just pause there. I'm going to say that again because that is so powerful. Let's slow down and listen. It's fascinating. So the Even Better podcast, why do we exist, right? We're helping people have better work days. And so I know that somebody looked at this title and went, I don't understand, how is improv going to help me have a better work day? And my friends, if you don't already hear it right now, you haven't been listening. So dial back, rewind, and let's listen to this. This is stuff that we teach all the time in effective communication. We need to slow down and we need to listen, not to respond, but we need to listen to hear. And listening is a total body experience, right? You listen with your eyes and you listen with your ears and you listen to what their nonverbals are saying. And that, you're telling us, Joe, is one of the first things that improvisers do to be successful. That's what good leaders do to be successful. That's what good team members do to be successful. Ah, I love this. Okay, let's keep going. What else you got?
Okay. Secondly, we choose our emotional reaction. Then that's a hard skill to learn. And when we talk about emotional intelligence, or if we're in the education world, the phrase is social emotional learning, all that plays into improv. So a scene might be going on, and my scene partner may say something, and I'm just going to go back to the example I used. Let's get a hamburger. I can now choose, how am I going to react to that? Do I want to be angry about that? Do I want to be upset about that? Do I want to be joyful and excited about getting a hamburger? I have all these options. And so it also plays into listening, because I'm going to listen to what they said. Then I'm slowing this process down so much, but then I can take a breath and choose how I'm going to react to that. And that plays into our day to day lives and our leadership skills, in that we need to be able to create a safe space where our people feel safe coming to us, especially on those days of like, okay, all the widgets are broken and we're not going to meet our sales quota that we thought, or whatever is coming up. When those bad news happen, employees or other coworkers, they're concerned that they're going to get yelled at, or in trouble, if you will, by creating a safe space where they know that I'm going to take a breath as a leader and I'm going to choose my emotional reaction so that we can solve the problem. If I get upset and I alienate all my people, that problem's still going to be there. And now I've alienated all people. I've broken the trust. So choosing our emotional reaction and understanding that we have that ability to slow, again, I'm going to say it a lot, slow down, take a breath, and choose how are we going to react is going to help us be more successful. And as leaders and as emerging leaders, that's a skill that we all need to learn to create those open and safe spaces where our people feel comfortable coming to us with those difficult conversations that have to happen.
Absolutely. This is so powerful, that choosing your emotional reactions. Your first thing improvisers do to be successful is to listen. And I think that is, man, any one of us could rewrite this and say the 5 things. The first thing that any human, any communicator, any team member, any leader needs to do to be successful is first listen. And then I love that slowing down to choose. The second one was choose your emotional reaction. Not going to talk out of school here or throw anybody under the bus or anything, but there was this time when 2 kids were at a dinner table. They were siblings, they were sisters. And one of the sisters, and it may or may not have been last night, but anyway, 2 kids are at the dinner table and one says something and the other, she barely finishes her first sentence. And the other chimes in with, no, I mean this. Like she says, I don't remember what it was that they were talking about. Well, one says something, the other says, no, it wasn't that, it was this. And then halfway through her own sentence realizes that no, her sister had said something that actually was correct. So she reverses her position mid-sentence, but because she started by choosing not to listen and by choosing, I shall argue with my sister because that's what I do. It's in the code. And then she had to backpedal and say, wait, no, actually you're right. But she didn't want to say she was right. It's fascinating. I mean, how many times does this happen in the business place, in the workplace, where we just come out fighting or we come out shooting or somebody says something and they've irritated us somewhere in the past. And so we're just assuming they're wrong. Or last week they did something that was frustrating. So we just assume they're going to be frustrating this week. Wow, if we choose our reaction and choose, hey, instead of getting worked up over this, let me just pause. Let me take a deep breath. Let me be calm. Let me be kind. Wow. Yeah. So Joe, in your workshops, do you teach people how to do this together? Like, do you do these skill practices that allow us to choose these emotional reactions that teach us that?
Yes, I do. I come at it from a number of different choices. Sometimes I bring in a script. Not everybody feels comfortable thinking fast on their feet like trained improvisers do. So I always bring tools with me to like help you feel comfortable so we can get to the meat of like choosing an emotional reaction. Working with a script or without, I will have them do a scene, give them some scenario. The widgets have exploded and the printer's not working, whatever. Now you have to go tell the boss. And so we're kind of role playing. And as the scene is progressing, each scene partner is saying their line, listening. There might be a time where I stop it and I'll say, all right, rewind. If you can remember what you said 2 sentences ago, now I want you to say that again. But this time, instead of saying that and being angry, say the same thing, but be joyful or be happy or be sad. So oftentimes I will start with 5 base emotions: anger, happiness or joy, fear, sadness, and disgust or regret, and just focus on those. And depending on what study you read, those are 4 or 5 base emotions, and actually all emotions after that are some combination hybrid of those base emotions. So as we become more comfortable in the workshop, I can then add, okay, now choose your emotions. That's one activity I do. Another one I do is I will have performers just stand and observe each other and ask them, just, you don't have to say it out loud, but what emotion are you feeling from your scene partner? And then I want you to choose your emotional reaction to that.
Fascinating.
So there are a number of different ways to get that emotion. And sometimes we'll do activities where like scene partner A, you're going to be mad the whole time. And then we get into the idea of, okay, and I use this phrase quite a bit. You're playing mad, and I don't know. I can take mad. You're playing joy at a 5. I want you to take that to an 8. And then I'll let them sit in that 8 level of joy for a little while. Okay, take that to a 9. Okay, I'm going to reset now, recalibrate. Your 9 is now a 5. I want you to go to a 10.
Nice.
And so not only are we exploring which emotions we choose, we're also exploring how can we communicate and how can we play within that emotion in of itself to what level and what extremes.
That range of emotions. Fascinating. I studied French for many years, and one of the things that has always struck me about the French language in particular is it doesn't have a lot of hyperbole. Like there's one word, the word content. Je suis content. I'm pleased, and it can mean I'm pleased, content. I am content to see you. I'm delighted that your long lost kitten has come back home. I am delighted with that. I'm delighted to be asked to be married. Like it can have this whole range of emotions, and it all it comes across in the cognate in the English is content, and it's that it's not a wide range of emotions. And then for people who are more prone to hyperbole, perhaps if we're prone to hyperbole, we run out of words for the really interesting days. But that idea of playing with the emotion and seeing, well, when I say content, how do you see content? Do you see content as calm? Do you see it as happy? What would that be? That would be really interesting. I can imagine that you're like when teams go through this together, that they might learn a lot about each other and how they process emotions, as well as their own internal learnings.
Yes, very much so, that they see and learn not only how they process, but how each other processes. And oftentimes, there's a lot of laughter in a workshop, which is great because we get into a sense of play, which allows us the freedom to learn even more so. And it releases endorphins and serotonin and the dopamine for us. So it's all positive reinforcement, and we come out feeling great, even though we may have explored something a little more challenging in this safe workshop environment. It works magic.
Oh, so neat. Okay, so for those of you who've just tuned in, we are here with Joe Van Haecke, and we're talking about the 5 things improvisers do to be successful. The first one is listen. The second is choose your emotional reaction. And we better move on to the third. So the third thing you said, as you were sharing some insights with me in advance, Joe, you shared that the third one is to take risks. That's a third thing that improvisers do to be successful. What does that look like?
In an improv show, you have that instinct of, I could choose, like we're talking about reactions and reacting to our scene partner, what's happening in the scene. I could choose A or B, or could I jump all the way to skip over D and E, and can I choose F and throw this into the scene? And that could be a big risk. We teach, go for that. If you see F and you can reach it, throw it into the scene, and that works magic. In an applied improvisation workshop, I encourage the people to take risks and to support each other taking risks. So I create an environment that, first of all, we're going to embrace failure. So the next two, take risks and embrace failure, there's going to be a lot of overlap here, but I want them to take risks. That little judgment voice or that critic that's inside our head of like, don't say that, that's not good, that's not worthy, whatever. That voice, we turn that voice off completely and encourage you to take the risks and to throw out those ideas that maybe you were censoring yourself for earlier. And when it comes into a business environment, we need to hear those voices. We need to hear our people taking risks and throwing out ideas and feeling safe that if I throw out an idea that just seems too far-fetched, somebody's going to support it. And we're going to at least explore that idea and take a big risk and see what develops out of that. We like to say we're going to believe in the outcome that we can't see and take that risk. Turning off that voice, that inner voice that's our own critic, is twofold. First of all, we're going to turn it off. That's criticizing ourselves, but we're also going to turn that voice off. And this is where it's super important, of other people's ideas. Again, going back to our big umbrella of yes, and there aren't any bad ideas. They're all going to be supported. They're all going to be there. So if Sinikka, you and I are in a scene and you take a big risk, let's say, hey, here, Joe, hold this piano. I don't know why that came to me. It just did. I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to criticize you. I'm going to say, thanks for the piano. Oh, and then that's my idea is like, you have no problem picking up the piano. It's super heavy for me. And then comedy ensues. Now the business application of that then becomes, okay, let's talk about what just happened. And Sinikka, you're saying, I threw out this idea. It didn't make any sense, but that's just what all my instincts told me to say. And then I'm going to ask you, well, how did that feel to throw that out there? And so in a business applied improvisation workshop, we take time after all the activities, each activity, to really sit and debrief and talk about how we're feeling and what did that do for us, and how did it feel freeing to know that I'm going to throw out a risk, but it's going to be completely supported by my ensemble or my team. And how can we take those feelings and that idea, and how can we apply that to our daily daily work routine or our daily basis or our brainstorm meetings.
You bet. Oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so this is a place where you're going to have to help us a little bit, I would guess, because we've got a fair number of
Sure.
listeners who are in financial services, are in actuarial sciences, are in accounting, are in spaces where risk is not necessarily a good thing, right? Where calculated risks are fine, but where that we follow the process and we follow the protocol, and there's a reason that we use these principles because they've worked for so long. And so not to say that many of our clients are not innovative, because the vast majority of them are, but there's certainly a broad band of our constituents or our listeners who are in organizations that are more, I don't want to use the word conservative, but I also don't want to use the word risk averse, but are less likely to take big risks than others. Entrepreneurial organizations or, highly cutting edge organizations are going to be doing some different risks. So talk me through that phrase that I can put something big out there and I will be supported. Now dial that back, or converse with someone who's going, whoa, but this isn't a place where we can have wild and crazy ideas. We've got some guidelines and we have to stay within our guidelines.
Of course. So one of the things of taking risks is having the confidence and security to know that if you see something that's not necessarily exactly right or within compliance or whatever our guidelines say, that you're going to willing to take the risk to go to your supervisor or somebody else and say, I've noticed this and I'm concerned about it. That's taking a risk. You're putting yourself out there.
Yep.
We're also want to be able to create an environment where we feel safe taking risks of throwing out new ideas. If we're trying to think of a new financial product for our customers, obviously we want to modify that for whatever what our end product is. And while the end product that goes out to the consumer might not seem like a big risk, maybe internally getting to that idea of developing that new product really engaged and needed people to feel safe to take risks, to throw out ideas. So a lot of it is maybe taking risks for our audience isn't the best phrase, but it's that willingness to shut down our inner critic and put ourselves out there in a place that's human and a place that's vulnerable in order to be more successful in and make ourselves better that day.
Absolutely. And Joe, I don't question your language there at all. I think you're absolutely right. It is taking risks, but it may be taking risks at that level of speaking up, or taking risks within the operating principles that we're within, or taking
Yes.
risks to help innovate or to put out those new ideas. And man, there are a whole lot of us who are listening to that little not good enough voice inside our heads. And that'd be nice to overcome that. Oh, for sure. Okay, so interest of time, we got to keep moving. 5 things improvisers do to be successful. We're here with Joe Van Haecke. The first one was listen. The second was choose your emotional reaction. Third is take risks. And now to the fourth one, embrace failure.
And I love talking about embracing failure. We see those graphs all the time of like, success looks like this, a straight line. No, we know that success is a jagged line with hills and valleys and failure. Unfortunately, throughout the course of our educational life, and even sometimes when we get into the business world or that first career step, failure becomes a bad thing and it gets pounded into us. And I teach, we need to embrace failure. We need to embrace our own failures as well as the failure of our team members so we can be successful together. And I really teach that we should, build up rather than tear down. So we're taking risks. Risk often comes with a big opportunity for failure. Well, we're going to embrace that failure and we're going to own it. We're going to celebrate it. And I always say at my workshops, I'm like, if you're not failing, you're not trying. If you're not trying, you're not learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. So oftentimes in the improv world, we talk about embrace failure. So I even have a couple of activities where I encourage people to like develop their own fail cheer. And I say, that's usually right at the top of a workshop. And I ask, if you take nothing else out of this, own your fail cheer. And mine is oftentimes the victorious V above my head. Yes, I failed. And I give permission. I'm like, if you guys want to use that, if you study Amy Cuddy and her ideas of presence and body language, that V for victory above your head is so empowering. So own your failure. Go out and celebrate your failure. Celebrate the failures of your team members, because you know that means that they're trying. And by doing that, embracing your own failure, again, and this gives us the other opportunity of like, we're going to shut down that self-critic, that judgment inside our head. that person's not there because that person would never celebrate failure like we do. So that's an important part of embracing failure so you can succeed.
Right. As you're doing that, like I failed. I'm picturing the go big or go home, right? I had a leader once who said, make a mistake a day if you want to, just make sure it's a big one. And he would like embrace the idea of failure through learning. As I was pre-reading this list, Joe, I got to tell you that at first I'm thinking, well, okay, so improv might not be for control freaks and it might not be for perfectionists, but I love the fact that you're teaching these skills, that ability to embrace failure.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up because that's one of the things that I believe when we hit an improv mindset. And believe me, I'm working on this personally on a daily basis, but that perfectionist, that controller, that all these improv skills help us become mindful of them and able to cope and gives us coping skills when that perfectionist gets in our way or when the imposter gets in our way. We can yes and the imposter to move beyond that mind blocker mindset. Additionally, if your team is made up of introverts and extroverts and they don't seem to be getting along or working together, an improv workshop works wonders because it sets boundaries for the extroverts and provides a safe space for the introverts. So we find a better balance between those personality styles and help them learn how to work together and be successful as well.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to lead us into your fifth point. So you're talking about 5 things that improvisers do to be successful. They listen, they choose emotional reaction, they take risks, they embrace failure. Now we're on to number 5, which you have coined as accept and build. What are we accepting and what are we building?
Exactly. I'm going to go back to that big umbrella phrase of yes and. This is probably the final peg of that umbrella for yes and is accepting and building. So in an improv world or an improv show, if I'm doing a scene, I throw out an idea, and I'm going to go back to the one I've used. Let's go get hamburgers. That's my idea. That's all I brought to the scene. That's all I have at the moment. My scene partner is going to accept that. Yes, let's go. And then I'm going to build on that idea. Yes, let's get hamburgers and I can drive my car. So I've accepted your idea and built on it, and I've thrown this new idea out there. Now my scene partner is going to accept that new idea and build on that. So when you go to an improv show and you walk away just amazed, we have done all 5 of those things to our extreme and accepting and building ideas. So in an improv workshop, an applied improv workshop for a business, we're teaching there are no bad ideas. We're going to accept and build on them. I have a fun activity where I start by saying no. So if Sinikka, you and I are in this activity, and our objective is to plan a vacation, and you start off with let's go to Paris. I'm going to say no. Let's go to Hawaii, and back and forth and back and forth. That lasts maybe a minute, 90 seconds at the most before people are either shutting down or almost in an argument of where they want to go because I encourage them to fight for their ideas. The problem is we haven't gone anywhere because we're not accepting, we're denying or blocking. By accepting and building, then I teach the yes and concept to accept and build. Let's go to Paris. Yes, and we'll see the Eiffel Tower. Yes, and we'll get ice cream on the Champs-Élysées. Yes, and then we can drop down to Spain. Yes, and yes, and yes, and. That activity does a number of things. First of all, the energy in the room does a complete 180. It raises to infinity. Everybody's positive. There's smiles everywhere. And then I debrief, and the first thing I ask is like, tell me about your trip. Oh, we went to Paris and Spain, and then went down and flew back over to the Caribbean. Next thing I knew, we were in a spaceship. We landed up on the moon, and it's just hilarious, the ideas that come about. Or sometimes they'll focus just on staying on one city and generate all the ideas that they want to do, accepting and building on each other's ideas of what they want to do in San Francisco, for example. And it's really a great activity. And then again, we take time to debrief. So what's the lesson here? How did that feel? How did it feel when you heard no after a while? And I can say this, and as we're probably even, as our listeners are even thinking about this, like after a while, you hear no so often, you're not going to throw out any ideas. Exactly. And I know from a classroom teacher perspective, I have 30 students, all their voices want to be heard. in an organization, everybody wants their voice to be heard. However, if I've heard no too many times, which could be as few as one, I'm not going to offer any more ideas.
Yeah.
By creating an environment where we're accepting and building, then I feel at least my voice is heard and honored. And that's really all I want. And so not only are we creating a safe space, we're creating a culture and we're creating an environment where people feel honored and respected, and they look forward to coming to work.
Oh, that sounds lovely. So as I think about that, we've been teaching for years about look for ways to empower others, right? Look for ways to say yes, look for ways to not, we don't want to be the Debbie Downer, we don't want to be the negative Nelly or the negative Ned or whatever it is, and constantly saying no. And there's obviously psychology behind this, there's science behind how it shuts people down, but to know that there's actually there's skill building, there's actual workshops, and besides just looking at someone and saying stop saying no, you could actually help someone develop skills, say something other than no. It's really, really empowering.
Exactly. I always like to say improv is not just for actors anymore.
Oh, I love it. Let's say that again. Improv is not just for actors anymore. So, okay. So I came into this conversation knowing 1.5 things about improv. And the thing that I knew, you said it a bunch of times, but the big thing that I knew was the yes and. And I learned that from a business analyst who used the technique of yes and in his stakeholder interviews when he was learning to Cooper Smith. If you haven't encountered him yet, he's on a mission to meet everyone in the world. So you will hopefully someday. So Coop was a improv guy for a while and brings that to the business analysis space. And he uses the yes and to get information out of his stakeholders. And then I co-opted it and used it in the project management training that I do when I'm teaching people. If you're a project manager and you've got hold of this project and you know how much scope you have and you know how much time you have and you know how much budget you have, and someone wants to make a change, instead of saying, no, you can't have that change, or instead of just blindly saying, yes, you can have that change, we say, yes, and that's going to require additional funds, or yes, and that's going to add some time, or yes, and. So we build on that, is accept it. Yes, I hear you. Your words matter to me, and I see that that's important. And now we have to figure out how we make it work in. So there's my 1.5 things I knew about improv. I knew it was really important. It counted as more than just one.
My work here is done then.
Absolutely, you validated something I thought I knew, and you've taught us so much. So I am super grateful. Joe, we are going to hopefully be working together we've got some cool, innovative workshop things coming up with some collaboration work going on. And so looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And then I know that this is a service that you offer, helping teams build their teams together through applied improv workshops. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, Joe, should they come through us at Your Clear Next Step, or is there some other way that is the best way to reach you?
I think the first step is through Your Clear Next Step, or they can learn more about me on my LinkedIn profile or my website, which is www.inspirememrv.com.
Awesome. I know that you've given us lots of things to think about, and a piece in particular that I hope our listeners are taking away is that one of the things that you're offering and that you've talked about, even just giving us ideas here in the podcast, is that by applying these ideas of improv to the workspace, not only are we doing the things that we know listening is important, right? We know that it's important to choose your emotion and to not always say no, but to say yes, to accept and build. But you're actually not just saying that it should be, but you're offering tools and tips for how to do these things. And I think that's really powerful, Joe. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm excited for all the opportunities that's just waiting out for me for the door to open.
This is so great. So we are just about ready to wrap up our podcast, and I need to ask the question that I always ask at the end, which is, Joe, this is the Even Better podcast. So what's making you even better these days?
What's making me better these days? My connections. My connections are leading to more connections and opportunities like this to talk about and spread the love and enthusiasm that I have for improv. And hopefully other people will catch up on that and join me on this crazy journey.
Outstanding. Thank you, Joe. So this has been Joe Van Haecke, and he's been talking about the 5 things improvisers do to be successful. And man, they are 5 things that every one of us should be doing to be successful. And you heard it here first, if not somewhere else, that improv is not just for actors anymore, man, it's for business too. So Joe, thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Sinikka, thank you so much. It was an honor and pleasure.
Awesome. And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And we wish you, on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.